The storm had swallowed the mountain long before dusk, wrapping the world in a dense, white silence that felt almost sacred. From the window of her small wooden cabin, she watched the snow twist in frantic spirals, each gust of wind shaking the old beams like an impatient hand demanding entry. She lived up here by choice, far from people, far from noise, but tonight the isolation felt different, heavy, expectant, as if the mountain was holding its breath. Her German shepherd puppy, Credo, lay by the door, tense and alert, listening to something she couldn't hear, his ears stiff as carved stone. He hadn't eaten all day, hadn't played, hadn't curled up by the fire like he usually did when the temperature dropped. Instead, he kept his gaze fixed on the door with a kind of stubborn intensity that unsettled her more than the storm itself. Several times she tried calling him to sit beside her, but he wouldn't move. The puppy wasn't afraid. She knew fear in animals. This was something else entirely. Purpose, instinct, a call only he could sense. And every hour that passed made the pressure in her chest grow heavier, as if she, too, felt something coming. When the wind hit the cabin with enough force to rattle the dishes on the shelf, Credo suddenly sprang to his feet. His tail went rigid. His body leaned forward. And then, he barked. Not a playful bark, not a warning bark, but a single, sharp, desperate sound that made the hairs on her arms rise. Before she could react, he slammed his small paw against the bottom of the door. Then again, and again. The wood shook with each hit. "Credo, stop!" she shouted, but he didn't. His eyes held the same message. "Let me out. Now. Before it's too late." She approached slowly, heart pounding so loudly she felt it in her throat. "What is it?" she whispered, her hand hovering over the metal latch. The puppy pressed his nose against the crack, whining with a sound she had never heard from him, urgent, pleading, almost human. The storm howled outside, drowning out every rational thought. But instincts speak louder than reason in the mountains. And right now, her instinct screamed one truth. Something out there needed help. Or someone. With shaking fingers, she unlatched the door and cracked it open just enough for a sliver of icy wind to stab through the gap. Before she could stop him, Credo bolted. He slipped through the opening like wind made of fur and muscle, disappearing into the blizzard in a heartbeat. "Credo!" Her voice tore out of her, raw and terrified, immediately swallowed by white darkness. She slammed the door shut, pressing her back against it as if the storm itself were chasing her. Panic surged through her veins. The puppy was young, too young to survive this cold for more than a few minutes. But she didn't have the luxury of panic. She ran for her coat and boots, barely feeling her fingers as she shoved them on. As soon as she stepped outside, the cold hit her like a blow. Snow slapped her cheeks and crawled down her collar. The wind roared in her ears, turning her breath into shards of ice. She could barely see her own hand in front of her face. The world had become an endless white void. But she forced herself forward, calling Credo's name until her throat burned. The snowstorm didn't ease. If anything, it grew angrier, as if trying to bury whatever had drawn the puppy out into the night. Her boots sank deep with each step, slowing her to a painful crawl. She walked blindly, guided only by instinct and terror. Minutes stretched endlessly as the cold seeped into her bones. Then, her foot hit something, soft but solid enough to make her stumble. She fell to her knees, hands plunging into the snow. Her fingers brushed fur. "Credo," she breathed, but the relief froze instantly when she realized he wasn't lying alone. He was wrapped tightly around a body, a human body buried beneath him. Her hands clawed at the snow. brushing aside layer after layer until a face emerged. Young, pale, frozen, lips blue. He was alive, barely, his breath fragile as fog. Credo whined, pushing himself closer to the man's chest, as if trying to warm him with the little heat his small body carried. Tears filled her eyes. The puppy had run into the storm not out of recklessness, but to save someone. She checked the man's pulse. Weak, thready, but there. "Hey," she whispered desperately, shaking his shoulder. "Stay with me. I've got you." He didn't respond. Snow clung to his eyelashes like tiny crystals. She had only one option: drag him back to the cabin. Her muscles screamed as she pulled, the man's dead weight working against the deepening drifts. The puppy stayed glued to the man, following every struggling step she made, refusing to leave his side even for a moment. The storm clawed at them, trying to push them back, but adrenaline and fear drove her forward. By the time she reached the cabin door again, her arms were numb, her legs shaking violently. She collapsed inside with the man and Credo, kicking the door shut behind them. The warmth inside felt like a miracle. She dragged the stranger closer to the fire, stripped off his wet layers, and wrapped him tightly in blankets. Credo curled against him immediately. Only when she stood again did she notice the metallic glint on the floor. A small steel container, rectangular, dented, sealed with a strange latch she didn't recognize. It must have fallen from the man's grasp when she dragged him. She picked it up. Even through her gloves, she felt something unsettling. It was warm. Not warm like human body heat, but warm like machinery. Constant, self-contained, faintly humming under the surface. "What were you carrying?" she whispered, her breath shaky. She set the container by the hearth, but couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't just an object. It was a warning. When she returned to the man, she lifted his head gently, checking his breathing. Still shallow, but steadier now that he wasn't freezing. His lips moved faintly. She leaned in, pressing her ear to his mouth. At first, she heard nothing but the crackling fire. Then, 3 strained syllables slipped through the silence like a knife. "Don't open it." She froze. Her hand trembled where it rested near his shoulder. He fell unconscious again, breath rattling unevenly. She slowly turned her head toward the metal container. Credo did too. The puppy's ears folded back. His body lowered. A soft growl trembled in his chest. For the next hour, she sat between the man and the container, unable to look away from either. The firelight reflected off the steel surface, making it flicker like something alive. The cabin felt smaller than ever, the shadows longer, stretching across the floorboards like fingers reaching for the unknown object. Outside, the storm hammered the windows with violent fists, reminding her how alone she was. Credo stayed pressed against the man, occasionally lifting his head to stare at the container as if expecting it to move. She whispered to herself, just to break the suffocating silence. Eventually, she forced herself up to make tea, more for the comfort of holding something warm than for drinking. Her mind raced with questions. Who was the man? Why was he up here in the middle of a deadly storm? What was inside the container that terrified him even as he hovered near death? And why had Credo sensed him from inside the cabin? None of it made sense. She wasn't used to mystery. Her life on the mountain was simple. Chop wood, mend fences, keep warm, stay alive. But tonight, the mountain had delivered a secret right to her doorstep. She approached the man again, studying his features in the firelight. Dirt smeared across his cheek, a long cut along his jaw, bruising around his temple. He looked like he'd been running, or hiding. His clothes were torn in places, not just from the storm, but from rough terrain. Something about him felt urgent, unfinished, like a story interrupted mid-sentence. She reached for his hand, checking for frostbite. His fingers twitched reflexively. She exhaled in relief. But then her gaze dropped to his jacket, specifically the inner pocket, where the fabric bulged slightly, as if concealing another small object. With cautious fingers, she unzipped the pocket. Inside was a folded piece of paper, soaked from the snow but still intact. She unfolded it near the fire, careful not to tear the fragile edges. What she saw made her heart lurch. A map of the mountain, but not the kind hikers used. This one showed underground routes, tunnels, cavities beneath the ridge she'd lived on her entire life. One path was marked in red, circling the exact area near her cabin. Next to it, in shaky handwriting, were 2 words: seal broken. Her stomach tightened. That couldn't mean what it sounded like. She looked back at the container. The latch seemed almost embossed, forged rather than installed, with symbols she didn't recognize, triangular shapes intersecting in a way that felt deliberate and cautionary. She touched it again, lightly. The warmth pulsed faintly. Was it a power source? A beacon? A lockbox? Why would the man warn her not to open something clearly designed to draw attention? And if the seal mentioned on the map was broken, what had escaped? Or what was trying to get out? Credo let out another soft growl, nudging her hand away from the container with his nose. Her pulse hammered. She backed away and returned to the man, shaking his shoulder. "Wake up, please." His eyelids fluttered. For a moment, he looked straight at her, eyes filled with fear so raw it sliced through the air like a blade. "You need to leave tonight," he rasped, "before they—" He coughed violently, pain twisting his features. She held him steady. "Before who? Who's coming? What is this thing you're carrying?" His gaze shifted to the container, then to the window as the storm raged outside. "They'll follow. The signal," he whispered. Then his body went limp again. Signal. The word echoed in her mind, chilling her deeper than the storm ever could. The warmth of the container, the humming, the symbols, the man's terror, a signal strong enough that they could track it? She looked at the map again, the tunnels beneath the ridge, the broken seal. Something was happening beneath this mountain, something that had drawn this stranger into the blizzard, something that made Credo sense danger long before she opened the door. She moved the container farther from the man, placing it on the far end of the cabin, though she doubted distance would truly matter. Credo followed her, positioning himself between her and the steel box like a tiny guardian with a heart too big for his body. His tail was low, but his stance was firm, ready to defend her from something neither of them fully understood. She sat beside him, placing a hand on his back, feeling the tension in his muscles. "We'll figure this out," she whispered, though she wasn't sure whom she was reassuring, him or herself. The fire crackled louder, as if reacting to the storm outside. The shadows danced more violently across the floorboards. Then, just as she allowed herself a single breath of stillness, the container clicked. A small, unmistakable metallic click, soft but sharp in the silence. Credo's growl rumbled like distant thunder. She froze. The latch shifted on its own, just an inch, enough to release a faint, cold breath of air from within, as though the box itself exhaled. She stumbled backward, heart slamming against her ribs. Whatever the man had carried through the storm. It wasn't passive, it wasn't silent, and it wasn't meant to be opened. But now, for the first time, it sounded like it wanted to be. For a long heartbeat, She could only stare at the container, watching the latch tremble like it was breathing on its own. The fire popped behind her, a sharp crack that made her flinch. Kratos stepped forward until his nose was almost touching the metal, teeth bared, a low, continuous growl vibrating in his chest. "No," she whispered, grabbing his collar and pulling him back. Her fingers shook so hard she could barely keep hold of him. The latch settled again. The click didn't repeat, but the feeling it left in the room stayed, thick and electric, like air before lightning. She forced herself to move, crossing the cabin to the window. Outside, the storm hadn't calmed. It had grown heavier, snow swirling in near horizontal sheets. No lights, no shadows, no sign of anyone else. Yet the stranger's words echoed in her skull. "They'll follow the signal." She looked back at the container, then at the man lying unconscious near the fire. If that box was broadcasting something out into the night, it didn't care about the storm. Whatever could survive in this cold to follow it was not something she wanted near her home, or near her dog. Her phone lay on the shelf near the door. She grabbed it with numb fingers, thumb waking the screen. No signal, of course. Out here, you got a bar or two on the ridge road if the weather was kind. Inside a cabin, inside a blizzard, there was nothing. Still, she opened the emergency dialer, just in case. Nothing changed. No bars. No hope. The feeling of isolation dug in deeper, more suffocating than the snow outside. "Okay," she muttered under her breath, forcing herself to breathe slower. "Okay, think. Don't panic. You've survived worse." That, she knew, was only half true. She crouched beside the stranger again, laying a hand lightly against his forehead. Warmer now. His breathing had deepened, chest rising and falling in a more regular rhythm. She gently lifted one of his eyelids, pupils reactive, alive. She almost laughed with relief, but the sound died when his lips moved again. She leaned closer. "You didn't open it, did you?" His voice was hoarse, shredded. "No," she whispered. "It clicked by itself." His fingers twitched, grabbing weakly at her sleeve. "You need to get away from here," he forced out, each word costing effort. "They'll come. The beacon's live." Her skin crawled at that word. Beacon. She glanced again at the container, now sitting small and silent in the corner, looking almost innocuous in the flickering firelight. "Who's they?" she asked. "Search and rescue? Police? Who are you running from?" He swallowed, eyes drifting but struggling to focus on her. "Not police," he rasped. "Old project, under the ridge. They want it back, not for safety." A coughing fit cut him off, his body racked with pain. Credo whined softly, pressing his nose into the man's hand. The stranger's fingers curled around the fur instinctively, as if clinging to an anchor. She fetched water, helping him drink in small sips. When his breathing settled again, he stared at the ceiling, voice barely audible. "We tried to shut it down years ago," he murmured, "but they buried the records instead, pretended it was over, thought no one would dig deep enough." His eyes moved to hers again. "I found the access tunnel. The seal was cracked. There was something down there. Pressure, gas, maybe worse. This thing," he nodded weakly at the container, "keeps it locked, or used to." The word used sent another cold shiver through her spine. She remembered the map, the marked tunnels, the words "seal broken," scrawled in shaky ink right under the area where her cabin stood. It had felt unreal before, like some paranoid scribbling. Now, with the box clicking on its own, it felt terrifyingly literal. "So this is what? A plug?" she asked, trying to make sense of it. "A failsafe?" His eyelids drooped, but he nodded slightly. "Portable lock," he whispered. "Someone stole the core years ago. I tracked it, was taking it to the only people who'd listen. But the storm found me first. His voice thinned and vanished. She sat back hard, mind racing. A device designed to keep something dangerous beneath the mountain contained. A broken seal. A broadcast signal. Someone or something could follow. And all of it sitting on her wooden floor like a forgotten lunchbox. She looked at the ceiling, at the timber beams that had held through countless winters. "This is my home," she muttered. "I came here to get away from broken things, not sit on top of one." Credo leaned against her, sensing the tremor in her voice. His presence steadied her more than logic did. Everything in her wanted to act, not freeze. She dragged the container closer to the table and studied it under the stronger light of her headlamp. The metal wasn't uniform. Some areas were smoother, almost polished, while others bore scratches and dents like it had been through years of rough handling. The latch was thick, interlocked with 3 small slots holding tiny recessed bulbs, now faintly glowing, red, heartbeat steady. There were numbers etched along the side, worn but legible. A long sequence, then Hollow 3 at the end. The same word from the underground plate the man had described. Project Hollow. She swallowed hard, her throat suddenly too dry. "Credo," she said softly. "Sit." The puppy obeyed instantly, though his gaze never left the container. "Guard," she added, and his body stiffened with focus, as if accepting a task he already believed in. She moved to the window again, wiping frost away with the back of her sleeve. Still nothing but swirling snow and darkness. But her imagination began to fill the white void with shapes. Headlights creeping along the ridge road, figures trudging through drifts, drawn by a signal pulsing from her living room. She couldn't know how far it reached. A few kilometers. The whole valley. More. If people were coming for it, and the man clearly believed they were. She doubted they were the sort she'd want within knocking distance. Men who buried projects under mountains didn't send social workers to retrieve lost tech. They sent the kind who broke doors. Her jaw tightened. She'd spent too much of her life letting other people's decisions crash into her. Up here, for once, she'd chosen the ground beneath her feet. No way was she giving it up without at least trying to protect it, or protect the town below, which had no idea what simmered beneath its friendly streets. She grabbed her notebook, flipped to a blank page, and began sketching quickly. The box, the latch, the glowing bulbs, the ID numbers, everything she might need to describe later. If she managed to get a call out, if someone at the other end believed her. She added the map details, tunnels, the marked point, the words seal broken. Her handwriting shook, but the lines took shape. When she was done, she stared at the page, then tore it out and folded it into her inside pocket. If something happened here tonight, she wanted at least some part of the truth to survive. The stranger stirred again, shifting under the blankets. His eyes fluttered open, glassy with exhaustion. "Did you move it?" he asked, voice raw. "Just across the room," she said. "It reacted. The latch moved. Red lights are on." He closed his eyes briefly, swallowing. "Then it's fully awake," he whispered. "Signal's clean. They'll locate it soon, storm or no storm." She crouched closer. Who exactly is they? His jaw tightened with a trace of anger. The ones who built the chamber under your mountain and lied about dismantling it. Men with funding and no conscience. They don't care who lives here. Her fingers curled into fists. She thought of the town in the valley. Kids trudging to school. The cafe owner saving her favorite seat. the postmaster who grumbled but always tucked aside packages. None of them knew any of this. "If this thing holds something back," she said slowly, "why does it send a signal at all? Why make it trackable?" He coughed, breath hitching. "Control," he rasped. "Fail-safe for men, not for the mountain." They wanted to monitor it, move it if needed, shut people up if anyone got too close. But once the seal down there cracked, his voice faded to a hoarse whisper. "You tried to run with it," she said, piecing the rest together. "To get it to someone who would actually shut the whole thing down, not just manage it." He gave the faintest nod. "I thought if I got above the snow line, signal would be weak. I underestimated the hardware. And the storm." He looked at Credo, a ghost of a smile in his tired eyes. "Your dog is the reason I'm not dead and adrift right now." Her throat tightened unexpectedly. She ruffled Credo's fur, and he leaned into her hand, never once relaxing his watch on the box. The wind outside shifted, pitch, rising into a higher, sharper howl that made the cabin's boards creak as if in protest. She checked the clock. Not that time meant much in a storm, but it gave her something to hold on to. Midnight was coming. She imagined vehicles fighting their way up the narrow road, heavy tires grinding through ice. Or maybe they'd come on snow machines from the far side of the ridge, bypassing town entirely. People like that didn't need permission to trespass. The thought of unfamiliar boots on her porch sent a spark of anger through the fear coiled in her gut. She moved quickly then, grabbing her old hunting rifle from its place above the door and checking the chamber. Loaded. Clean. The weapon wasn't meant for people. Her bullets had always been for wolves too bold or for emergencies of a simpler kind. But it made her feel less helpless. She set it within reach, leaning against the wall near the window. She turned off the overhead light, plunging the cabin into deeper shadow, lit only by the fire's glow. No sense advertising her exact position to anyone out there with binoculars and night vision. Credo shifted closer to the container, muscles taut. The minutes dragged, stretching like thin ice over deep water. Each small sound became amplified. The pop of resin in the logs, the stranger's ragged breathing, Credo's soft huffs. Once, a distant thump echoed through the storm, so faint she almost convinced herself she imagined it. Another followed, closer. Not thunder, not falling snow, something mechanical. A low growl spilled from Credo before he even stood. He lifted his head, ears straining toward the door. The hair along his spine rose in a slow wave. Her heart rate doubled. If the dog heard something, it wasn't in her imagination anymore. She crawled to the window and peeled back the edge of the curtain, squinting through the frost. At first she saw nothing but swirling white. Then, faint, far down the slope, a pinprick of artificial light flickered between the trees. Then another, moving, climbing. Headlamps, maybe. Not from town. Those lights came from the opposite direction. Whoever was out there was coming from the side of the ridge, where no one sane drove in winter. Her mouth went dry. She let the curtain fall and backed away, pulse drumming in her ears. "They're here already," she whispered. "Storm or not, they're coming." The stranger heard her. His eyes snapped open with sudden clarity. "Listen to me," he said, voice shaking but firm. "You can't fight them head on. They'll take the box, and they won't care if they bury you with it. Your best chance is distance. Turn it off if you can. Hide. Call for help when you reach signal. Let people who aren't owned by this project see what's under their feet." She looked at the humming container, at the fire, at Credo pressed between fear and loyalty, and felt the weight of a decision settle over her like the snow outside. Quiet, heavy, inescapable.